A seemingly ordinary morning at a prestigious downtown hospital became the epicenter of a nationwide controversy. A senior doctor punched a nurse in the shoulder and ordered her to leave the facility immediately, just minutes after she was accused of slapping an elderly patient. The scene unfolded quickly, chaotically, under immense pressure. No one asked questions, no one defended her, and no one could have imagined the person being thrown out of the hospital was in fact the only one brave enough to speak up for the truth. Her name was Kiara James, a dedicated nurse who had served 6 years at Sterling Medical Pavilion, a place praised for its professionalism and flawless reputation. But beneath its cold, polished surface lay a silent power structure where truth was often suffocated by status and wealth. As Kiara was pushed through the glass doors bearing the hospital's logo, every eye turned away. It was as if a silent agreement had been reached. She was at fault, a young nurse, a black woman, someone without privilege, but by the next morning, everything they thought they knew would be flipped upside down. A video, accidentally recorded by a young patient, went viral online. In it, the undeniable truth was revealed. Kiara hadn't attacked. She had defended herself. And from that moment on, everything began to change. Not just for Kiara, but for a system far too used to being unquestioned. Don't look away, because this isn't just a story about a slap. It's a wake-up call for the silence we've grown too used to accepting. Sterling Medical Pavilion is not a place for the ordinary. With marble-tiled hallways, softly glowing ceiling lights, and the subtle scent of lavender in the air, it has long been hailed as the pinnacle of elite healthcare. From a reception desk designed like a boutique hotel to an espresso bar serving cold brew with precision, every detail is meticulously crafted to exude status and order, but beneath that polished exterior lies a system powered by sideways glances, unspoken pauses, and unwritten rules reserved for a select few. In that world, Kiara James stood out, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. As the only black female nurse in the entire hospital staff, her presence was a low note in a chorus of middle-aged white men, all bound by familiar handshakes and private agreements. She wore no expensive jewelry, didn't graduate from an Ivy League school, but she had something far more valuable: courage. 6 years in the field, countless night shifts, unending emergency cases. Kiara wasn't just a nurse. She was an anchor for the overlooked, the vulnerable, the unseen. Yet, in internal meetings, her opinions were often brushed aside. When she entered a room, conversations halted, and when she spoke, people offered thin smiles and quickly moved on, as though her words were less important than the color of her skin. Sterling didn't know how to handle a woman like Kiara, not because she was weak, but because she existed, and that existence in itself was a quiet rebellion. And then one day, that rebellion wasn't so quiet anymore. It started in room 312. The silver nameplate read Arthur Dillon, 68 years old, a post-knee surgery patient and former board member of a major medical foundation. He was not an average patient. Every word, every gesture, even the way he combed his hair or chose his cashmere sweaters, felt performative. When Kiara first entered the room, his gaze landed on her not out of medical need, but curiosity, appraisal, then amusement. "You're not what I imagined," he said, lips curling into a faint smirk, voice raspy but firm. "Kiara, what an interesting name. Sounds exotic." That word, exotic, wasn't new to Kiara. It wasn't a compliment. It was a subtle way of reminding her, you don't belong here. In the days that followed, Dillon began requesting Kiara for private tasks, dressing changes, bathing, toileting, duties that didn't require her, but which he insisted only she do. Even when male nurses or other techs were available, he would stubbornly call her by name in that half-joking, half-menacing tone. "I think you do it better than the others." Every lingering stare, every backhanded comment about her body, every time his hand accidentally brushed her wrist or hip, too calculated to be coincidence. Kiara noticed it all, and she started documenting meticulously. Using a private journaling app, she wrote down every detail, times, quotes, how she felt. She didn't know if she'd need it, but she knew that in a system like this, without evidence, her voice meant nothing, and those notes would become her most powerful weapon. On a grey Thursday morning, as light rain tapped the glass canopy of the West Garden, Chiara walked into the office of Chief Physician Dr. Richard Harper. This was where all critical decisions were made, quietly, behind walnut desks and color-coordinated bookshelves. Harper wasn't a brute, but he was cold, a kind of cold, masked by politeness and polished manners. When Chiara said she needed to speak privately, he looked up in mild surprise and gestured for her to sit. "I'd like to report a patient," Chiara began, her voice steady, though her hands tightened slightly. "Mr. Arthur Dillon, he's behaved inappropriately, repeatedly." Harper leaned back with a sigh as if the matter was tedious. "In what way inappropriate?" Chiara recounted, clearly. No embellishment, no complaints, just the facts. When she finished, Harper was silent for a moment before nodding. "Chiara, I understand," he said, "but Mr. Dillon is an elderly man who's done a lot for this hospital. He's alone. Maybe he's just trying to feel human again. A bit of flirting, it's not ideal, but sometimes older patients just want attention." She stared at him, stunned. "Doctor, this wasn't flirting." "Then keep documenting everything," he replied, as though the matter were closed. "But don't escalate. You're one of our best nurses. Don't let personal feelings derail your career. Stay professional. Don't overreact." Walking out of that office, Chiara didn't feel relieved. Only one phrase echoed in her head. "Don't make it a big deal." Then they didn't listen, but the worst was yet to come. That morning began like any other. Chiara reported for duty in a crisp uniform, badge straight, expression resolute. She braced herself for another cold day like all the recent ones. But she had no idea it would be the last time she walked those hospital halls as a nurse. When she entered room 312, Arthur Dillon was already watching. Right on time, he smiled. Chiara said nothing, focused on the tablet and preparing medications. "Can you pick up my handkerchief under the bed?" he asked casually, like always. She hesitated for a moment, then bent down. The cloth was beneath his foot. She reached, and in that moment his hand grabbed her waist, harder than ever, fingers deliberately brushing deep along her lower abdomen. No thinking, no hesitation, just instinct. Chiara slapped him, a reflex of survival. The sound cracked through the sterile hospital room. Arthur staggered back, clutching his cheek, mouth agape. Then, like it was rehearsed, he began moaning, collapsing into his chair as if about to faint. "She hit me. I just asked for help. She hit an old man." Less than a minute later, 3 staff members burst into the room, followed by Dr. Harper, eye sharp, clipboard in hand. "Chiara?" he snapped. She stood frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding. He touched me again. I defended myself. "In front of a patient," Harper barked. "Out, now!" Chiara looked around. No one spoke. No one defended her. No one asked if the cameras caught anything. No investigation, no consideration, only one verdict, swift, cold, final. She was fired. For a slap of self-defense, she was punished like a criminal. Here is the full and faithful English translation of your text, preserving the original tone, emotion, and message without omitting or adding any content. Less than 48 hours after being dismissed from the hospital, Chiara James's name appeared in 3 local newspapers, but not with a fair headline, not nurse harassed. Instead, female nurse assaults elderly patient, immediately fired. The media clung to the story like it was weekend entertainment. They echoed the words of the hospital, of Dillon, of Harper, but no one asked Chiara. No one searched for the video. No one questioned why once commended nurse would suddenly strike a patient mid-shift. She became the symbol of what society is always ready to believe, that black women overreact, that they can't control their emotions, that they're dangerous. Her colleagues, those who once laughed with her in break rooms, who once asked her to cover their shifts, no longer replied to messages. Not a single check-in. She was erased from the hospital system as if she'd never existed. Even the thank you plaques bearing her name under Employee of the Month were removed overnight. Chiara locked her social media accounts, avoided her phone. She went nowhere, saw no one. Each morning she had to remind herself that this wasn't a nightmare, that it had really happened. In her small apartment, where the only sound came from the soft hum of the air conditioner, she sat for hours staring at the empty space in front of her. The journal entries she once wrote to keep track of her work now sat still, like silent evidence no one wanted. Chiara didn't cry. She just folded inward, like a child forgotten in a crowded room. Oh, every door had closed, but the darkest place is also where light begins to creep in. One October afternoon, as autumn sunlight streamed through the window like a golden ribbon, Chiara's mother, Mrs. Eloise, knocked on her door. She didn't say much, didn't offer hollow sympathy. She simply brought a pot of chicken soup, a long hug, and eyes that had seen the world and its fractures. "You may no longer be their nurse," she said, holding Chiara's hand tightly, "but you're still someone who knows how to care, and that starts with yourself." Chiara sat quietly for a long time after that hug, and then she began to write. Not scattered journal entries, but a complete record, clear, detailed, time-stamped, with events, emotions, and responses from her superiors. She reached out to an organization supporting healthcare workers who had been harassed or wrongfully suspended. There, she was connected to a labor rights attorney and an independent journalist known for uncovering abuse in private hospital systems. They listened, they believed her, and most importantly, they acted. Just 1 week after the first article about Chiara's story was posted on a human rights blog, an email landed in the organization's inbox. "I'm a former patient of Nurse Chiara. I have a video of the incident with Mr. Dillon. I don't know if it helps, but I believe she did nothing wrong." Chiara opened the video with trembling hands. And when the footage came into focus, Dillon's hand grabbing her, her reflexive slap, the shock and fear on her face, she burst into tears. Not from weakness, but because for the first time, the truth had a voice. And from that moment on, Chiara was no longer just a victim. She was a force of resistance. The video was only 22 seconds long, but those 22 seconds were enough to shake a system long thought untouchable. When the clip was first posted by the independent journalist under the title "This is the truth they didn't want you to see," no one expected that within just 4 hours it would reach over 1 million views. By the end of the day, it had spread across all major platforms, Twitter, TikTok, medical forums, and was shared by prominent nursing figures and civil rights activists. In the video, everything was clear. Arthur Dillon deliberately reached for Chiara's waist. She slapped him instinctively. And most importantly, the look of fear and shock on her face completely contradicted the media narrative of her being out of control. Public reaction came faster than the evening news. Hundreds of comments flooded the video. She didn't attack. She defended herself. Sterling Hospital owes her an apology and a full investigation. How many more women of color have to stay silent? Within 48 hours, Dillon was arrested for sexual harassment, backed by video evidence. Patient and healthcare worker advocacy organizations called on Sterling Medical Pavilion to disclose their dismissal process transparently. Chief Physician Harper was suspended pending investigation. And then, what no one expected happened. Other nurses, once silent, began to share similar experiences. A wave of empathy and bravery spread, as though that video didn't just exonerate Chiara. It freed others from the shadows of the fair. It wasn't just justice arriving. It was a collective awakening. The courtroom that morning was packed. Reporters crowded the halls, and inside a strange silence hung in the air, like everyone was holding their breath for something that transcended legality and touched the core of human conscience. Kiara James took the witness stand in a plain white blouse and a black coat. No dramatic speeches, no tears, no anger. She simply stood there, quiet and steady, just as she had always been throughout her years in the profession. "I'm not angry," she said, voice firm and even. "I'm scared. Scared because I know that if I stayed silent, many more people would be treated like me, and no one would believe them." The courtroom fell completely still. No coughs, no whispers. When asked whether she sought compensation or further legal action against Harper, Kiara shook her head. "I'm not here for revenge. I want change. I want hospitals, especially those claiming to be elite, to rethink how they treat their staff, especially those without privilege." From the trial, a wave of reforms began. Sterling Medical Pavilion came under federal review for internal policy and complaint handling. Its senior leadership was overhauled. Dr. Harper was terminated, not just for his mishandling of Kiara's case, but for several others that surfaced afterward. The hospital was required to publicly apologize to Kiara. But more importantly, a new statewide policy was enacted. All internal complaints from nurses and staff must now be recorded and archived. They can no longer be ignored. But justice didn't come for one person. It came for a system that had refused to listen. Nearly a year after the landmark trial, Kiara James returned to the halls of a hospital, this time not as a nurse, but as Director of Human Resources Policy and Professional Ethics at a major public hospital in a neighboring city. No more scrubs. No more exhausting night shifts. Instead, strategy meetings, reform plans, and most importantly, the chance to build the kind of environment she had once longed to work in. Under her leadership, the hospital implemented mandatory training programs on discrimination, workplace harassment, and how to safely respond to abuse of power. No more buried complaints. No more silence for professionalism. Her name appeared in medical journals, not in scandal columns but in features about those reshaping the industry through personal resilience. She doesn't call herself a hero, but to many young professionals in healthcare, Kiara is the living embodiment of something simple yet powerful: the right to speak up and be heard. During an orientation session for new nursing students, she walked into a small classroom and smiled softly. No microphone, just eye contact and a quiet statement. When you speak the truth, silence begins to crack, little by little, and one day your voice may save yourself or someone not yet strong enough to speak. And in that well-lit room, everyone understood some falls are meant to rebuild a better world. Kiara didn't just rebuild her career, she rebuilt faith in justice from the pieces of her own brokenness. No one in this story is a perfect villain or flawless hero. They were all part of a system that stayed silent when it should have spoken, that turned away when it should have faced the truth. Kiara James didn't destroy that system. She didn't call for protests. She didn't smash things. She didn't blame the world. She simply stood up, firmly and alone, for something simple: justice. She didn't wait to have a crowd behind her. She didn't wait to be better, stronger, or famous. She acted when everyone told her to be quiet. She stepped forward when others turned away. And she believed that the truth, even small, has its own weight. In a televised interview, replayed many times afterward, when asked what she hoped people would remember her for, Kiara smiled, not with pride or bitterness, and said, "Not all justice arrives like thunder. Some come quietly and stay. I didn't do anything grand. I just refused to be silent. That's all." Her story didn't end with applause, medals, or plaques on the hospital walls. It ended with a quiet but profound transformation, rippling through new hallways, new policies, and into the lives of the young people now being taught. When you speak the truth, you don't just save yourself, you light the path for those who come after. And maybe that, not the ruling, not the slap, but that was the greatest shock the system had ever known.